In the first video, we have started the first chapter of 6th standard history, so we will now continue it. So we'll now start with the next point, finding out about the past. There are several ways of finding out about the past. One is to search for and read books that were written long ago. So in points before we studied that which things we can learn from the past. Now we will study how we can find information about the past. So first is we have to search and find the books and read those books which were written long ago in those times. These are called manuscripts because they were written by hand. This comes from the Latin word manu, meaning hand. So the books written during those times were called as manuscripts because they were written by hand. And in the word manuscripts, manu is a Latin word and its meaning in Latin is hand. So manuscript means the books written by hand. These were usually written on a palm leaf or on the specially prepared bark of a tree known as birch, which grows in the Himalayas. So during those times there were not papers, pencils, ink to write the books. So these manuscripts were mainly written on a palm leaf, a leaf of a palm tree, or on a specially prepared bark of tree known as birk, which specially grows only in Himalayas. Over the years, many manuscripts were eaten away by insects, some were destroyed, but many have survived, often preserved in temples and monasteries. So, the manuscripts or the books written thousands of years ago, many of them have not survived. Some have been eaten by insects, some are destroyed, but some of them have survived because they were preserved in temples, monasteries, or they were transferred from one generation to another. And today you can also see that many manuscripts are also preserved in museums. These books deal with all kind of subjects, religious beliefs. So the books, manuscripts written during those times deals with all kinds of subjects of those times, religious beliefs and practices. So from that we get to know information about the religions that prevailed during those times, what was the religious practices of the people, the lives of kings. We get to know about the lives of kings, their daily routine, when they used to fought the wars, what were their techniques to manage the city, etc. We also get to know about the medicine and science, which medicines were used, what was the use of Ayurveda during those times, and how did science grow in the future. Besides, there were epics, poems, plays. So, besides the books, besides the manuscripts, there were many epics, poems, and plays written during those times. So, it also helps us to get the information about the past. Many of these were written in Sanskrit and others were in Prakrit and Tamil. So, the plays, epics, poems, and manuscripts were mainly written in Sanskrit and some were written in Prakrit and Tamil. So, as you can see that there is mentioned that Prakrit is a language used by ordinary people. So I'd like to tell you that in Vedic period in 1,000 of years ago, Sanskrit was a language of a privileged section. Educated class used to speak Sanskrit, but the common people, ordinary people were not able to learn Sanskrit. So the language they used to speak language named Prakrit. So Prakrit was the language of ordinary people and Sanskrit was the language of educated privileged sections during the Vedic period. On the top of the page you can see the image. It is a manuscript written on a palm leaves thousands of years ago. During those times, palm leaves were cut into pages and bind together to make a book. We can also study inscriptions. These are writing on relatively hard surface such as stones or metal. So to know the information about the past, to find events about the past, we can also study inscriptions. What are inscriptions? Inscriptions are a writing on a hard surface such as stone, metal, wall, etc. Sometimes king got their orders inscribed so that people could see, read and obey them. So the kings, rulers during those times used to get their orders inscribed on stones, metals or coins so that people could see, read and obey them in their daily life. There are other kinds of inscription as well, where men and women, including king and queen, recorded what they did For example, king often records of victories in battle. So there are various kinds of inscriptions as well. There are some inscriptions in which king, queen used to keep record of events, of things they did. For example, kings during those times used to keep the records on stones and metals of the victories they got in the battles. So can you think of the advantages of writing on a hard surface? So according to you, are there some advantages of writing on a hard surface? And what could have been the difficulties? And so what difficulties you think that may be arised on writing on a hard surface like stone or metal? There were many other things that were made and used in the past. So there are many other things, many other objects which were made in those times and were used. So those people who study these objects are called archaeologists. So the people who study those objects of those times are called as archaeologists. They study the remains of building made of stone and brick, paintings and sculpture. So the archaeologist studies remains of buildings from stone and brick, paintings and sculptures made during those times. They also explore and evacuate to find tools, weapons, pots, ornaments, and coins. So the archaeologists explore and evacuate. It means that they dig under the surface of earth to find tools, weapons, pots, ornaments, and coins made during those times. Some of those objects may be made of stone, others of bone, baked clay, or metal. So the objects made during those times may be of bone, clay, metal, or various subjects. Objects that are made of hard, imperishable substances usually survive for a long time. So the objects made from hard and imperishable substances were usually survived for a long time. They were sustainable for a long time. They do not used to get destroyed. So in the screen you can see an old inscription. The inscription dates to about 2250 years ago and was found in Kandahar, present day Afghanistan. So the inscription is 2250 years old. It was written in those times and found in Kandahar, which is now present day Afghanistan. The inscription was inscribed on the orders of a ruler named Ashoka. So the Ashoka was the ruler of a Mauryan empire, inscribed and gave order to inscribe these inscriptions. You will read about Ashoka and Mauryan Empire in chapter 8. So when we write anything, we use a script. Script consists of letter or signs. So when we write anything about any topic, we use a script, which means letters or signs. When we read what is written or when we speak, we use a language. So while speaking, while reading, we use a language. So the inscription was inscribed in two different scripts and languages. The top part of inscription was written in Greek language and script. The below part of inscription was written in Aramaic language and script, which were mainly used in the area of Kandahar. Archaeologists also look for bones of animals, birds, and fish to find out what people ate in the past. So, besides the objects made in the past, archaeologists, while exploring, also look for the bones of animals, birds, and fish. So, to understand and find from it that what people used to eat in the past and those times. Plant remains survive far more rarely. If seeds of grain or pieces of wood have been burnt, they survive in a charred form. Plant remains do not survive for a long time. In rare cases, there are rare cases in which plant remains have been survived if their seeds or grains have been found. Pieces of wood have been burnt, they survive in a charred form. So when the pieces of woods are burnt, they survive in a charred form. Do you think cloth is found frequently by archaeologists? So there is a question for you that do you think that cloth is found frequently by archaeologists while exploring? So please find answer about this and mention in comment section. Historians, that is scholars who study the past, often use the word source to refer to the information found from manuscripts, inscriptions, and archaeology. So the scholars and people who study about the past are known as historians, and they often use the word source to refer to information found from manuscript, inscriptions, and archaeology. So the information found from manuscripts, inscriptions, and archaeology is termed as source by historians. Once sources are found, learning about the past becomes an adventure as we reconstruct it by bit. So once the information and sources are found, so the learning about the past, finding information about the past becomes an adventurous because we get some parts of sources and then we can try to reconstruct it by the process. So historians and archaeologists are like detectives who use all these sources like clues to find out about our past. So we compare historians and archaeologists to detectives. So as detectives find various clues and then derive to the conclusion of the case. Similarly, archaeologists and historians found different small sources which they bring together and try to find out about our past. So the image on the left side is a pot from an old city. These types of pot were used 4700 years ago, and on the right side it is an old silver coin which was used 2500 years ago. So next point, one past or many. So did you notice the title of this book, Our Past? So everyone of you knows that the title of the book is Our Past. We have used the word past in a plural to draw attention to the fact that the past was different for different groups of people. So the makers of book want to inform that the word past is in plural form because they want to inform us that the different groups of people had a different past. So the groups of people have differences in their past. So like there are many tribes, so life of people in every tribe was different. So the differences in the life of different groups of people is suggested by using the word past in a plural form. For example, the lives of herders or farmers were different from those of kings and queens. The lives of merchants were different from those of craftspersons and so on. So as we seen that there were differences in the past of different groups of people. So for example, the herders and farmers life were different, their daily routine was different, and of kings and queens was different. Lives of merchants were different from those of artists, craftspersons, warriors, etc. Also, as is true even today, people follow different practices and customs in different parts of country. It is also true even today, we can see instances of it in present. So as people follow different practices and customs in different parts of the country. So as you can see that the festivals are celebrated in different ways in parts of country of India, like in northeast they have additional festivals of tribes. Festivals like Makar Sankranti have different names all over the India, like Onam, Pongal, etc. So the differences in the lives of different groups of people are still prevalent today. For example, today most people living in Andaman Islands get their own food by fishing, hunting, and collecting forest produce. By contrast, most people living in cities depends on others for supplies of food. So for example, the people who live in Andaman Islands have to get food by fishing, by gathering forest produce or by hunting. But the people living in cities on the other side are dependent on suppliers of food. They are dependent on farmers, they are dependent on suppliers for their food. They do not gather their own food. And such differences were also existed in past. Like farmers and herders were used to gather their food from hunting, fishing, and on other side kings and queens were dependent on supplies. So the differences in the lives of different groups of people were prevalent in past as well as today. Besides, there is another kind of difference. We know a great deal about kings and the battles they fought because they kept records of their victories. Generally, ordinary people such as hunters, fishing folk, gatherers, farmers, or herders did not keep records of what they did. So, there is another difference in the past that kings and rulers in the past used to keep the records of the battles they have won, the victories they have got. So we have no great deal, we have a great information about the battles which king have won. And but ordinary people in that time, such as hunters, fishers, gatherers, herders, farmers, do not used to keep the records of the things what they did. but archaeology helps us to find out about their lives. There is much that remains unknown. But archaeology helps us to know about the lives of hunters, farmers, and herders. But there is much that has remained unknown, and we aren't able to learn about it. So, the second difference is that kings and queens in the past used to keep the records of the things they do, but ordinary people in that times, like hunters, farmers, and gatherers, do not used to keep the records of things they do. The remaining part of the chapter will be continued in the next video. So if you have any doubts or questions related to the video and chapter, then please mention it in comment section. We will try to answer your all doubts and queries. If you have liked our initiative, then please like and share the video as much as you can and continue showing support to our initiative. Thank you for watching.